After the Beijing Circle's crown prince lost his memory, he pursued me relentlessly. I played the role of Ethan's girlfriend for 3 years, only to realize that I had developed genuine feelings. Just as I was about to tell him about my pregnancy, I overheard the senior who had bullied me saying to him, "Ethan, thank you for pretending to have amnesia to vent my anger, pranking Irene 99 times. As long as you prank her 100 times, I will date you." Only then did I realize that Vivian was Ethan's unattainable white moonlight, and I was merely a clown he used to please Vivian. Later, I died in a plane crash. Ethan frantically searched through the wreckage but only found a ring with the inscription, "The 100th prank, I bet you love me." It is said that Ethan knelt in the wreckage, crying until he collapsed and was taken to the hospital. Upon waking, he turned against everyone who had participated in pranking me. Meanwhile, in the snowy winds of France, I smiled as I burned my medical records. He faked amnesia to deceive my sincerity, I used a fake death to teach him a lesson. Separated by a wall, Vivian's voice rose at the end, "Brother Ethan, the 96th prank game is a success." Ethan's voice carried an unfamiliar sneer. "Does Vivian find it amusing?" "It's to vent your anger, sister-in-law. Who let Irene steal your national award and the game design competition championship?" Ethan's buddies jeered, "Sister-in-law, once we reach 100 pranks, Ethan can officially announce you." My blood froze instantly. I must say, Ethan is really good at this, coming up with the idea to pretend to have amnesia to prank Irene. The first time, making her search for the bracelet in the rain, and when it was finally given to Vivian, the look on her face. My nails dug into my palms. That was the Hetian jade bracelet my mother gave me before she passed away. Ethan said he lost it while moving. That day, I searched for it in the heavy rain for 7 hours and ended up with a fever of 40 degrees. The best one was on the day of her defense. Ethan tricked her into thinking he was drunk and beaten up at the bar. His buddies laughed. Irene rushed to the bar only to find there was no fight, and I secretly filmed her crying and begging the supervisor. I bit my lower lip hard. That time, I abandoned my defense preparation of 6 months to look for Ethan, and in the end, I had to postpone my graduation. Vivian chuckled, and that time, using her game design draft that she stayed up 3 nights to make into paper airplanes, she picked them up with red eyes all night, looking just like a stray dog. Ethan smiled timely. "How shall we prank her this time?" "Let's say Ethan is in the hospital and ask her to come quickly, while we go to a party and make her wait in vain." My phone vibrated immediately. It was Ethan, City Hospital emergency room, "Come quickly." Afraid of being discovered, I quickly left. But 2 minutes later, Ethan withdrew the message, as if regretting deceiving me. I pretended I never received it and didn't reply, playing along. Actually, I had anticipated these things. While Ethan was taking a shower, I accidentally found an encrypted video on his phone named Game Progress. There were 96 in total, exactly matching the number of pranks I had endured. The password was Vivian's birthday, 12/24. He lied to me, saying it was the day he first met me. On that day last year, I waited for him in the snow for 3 hours to spend Christmas Eve. But he was at the Shin family's villa, putting a birthday crown on her, and didn't come until late at night. Ethan carefully wrapped the scarf around my neck, seemingly cherishing me deeply. My heart ached dully as I opened the messages. I found that in the pinned chat, he reported the prank progress to Vivian every day, densely packed. "Today I lied to her that I was working overtime at the company, but actually I took you to Disneyland." She waited until 3 a.m. I deliberately told her the competition time was 2 hours later. Her running in pajamas was hilarious. The last message stopped on the day of the class reunion. When Vivian accidentally spilled hot coffee, Ethan instinctively protected me. But in the chat records, it said, "Touching her makes me feel dirty." I sprayed disinfectant 3 times. I called my dad and said I wanted to move to Paris with him. 5 years ago, after my mom passed away, he had been living in the place where they fell in love, accompanying her for the rest of his life. But for Ethan, I stayed in China, rejecting the suggestion to study abroad, and couldn't reunite with my dad all year round. I once thought that after warming Ethan's cold heart, I would see spring, but I forgot that when the ice melts, only bone-chilling cold remains. My moth-to-flame true love was nothing but a prank game, and I was even more of a clown he used to pursue his white moonlight. Hearing my words, my dad was delighted. "My precious daughter, you've finally come to your senses." I held back tears and hummed in agreement. "Dad, when I leave, help me stage a plane crash." He didn't understand but still agreed. The plane crash was my final gift to Ethan. I wanted him to regret the name Irene for the rest of his life. I deleted all the photos on my phone. When I was packing at home, a leather notebook slipped out of Ethan's safe. The dark green cover was embossed with the phoenix emblem of the game Mountain and Sea Ashes, the initial logo I designed after staying up for 36 nights. Ethan had it printed on it, and inside were all my design drafts over the years, carefully collected by him, wishing my dreams come true. Turning to the 7th page, I suddenly paused. Next to a photo of me wearing glasses and coding, there was a sticky note. Today she scolded the planner like a puffed-up cat, and the revised plan was 10 times better. How can there be such a cute genius? So every time I stayed up all night drawing drafts, Ethan would accompany me, giving me massages and cooking noodles. Because of a single sentence from me, he would run out at midnight to buy me cake, and during my period, he would prepare brown sugar ginger tea and heating pads on time. It was said to be a love prank game, but he was clearly deeply involved as well. On the last page, there was a ticket stub from last year's Chishi festival, with his vigorous handwriting filling the blank space. If I could choose again, I would still pretend to lose the ticket and trick her into staying with me at the airport to revise the plan all night. Because this was promised to Vivian, the 72nd prank. Raindrops pelted against the bay window. All the affection was built on self-deception. He might love me, but he loved Vivian more. I was just a tool to vent his anger. Trembling, I took out my phone and scheduled an abortion. Late at night, I lay in bed and heard Ethan coming home with a chill, pretending not to notice. For a long time, there was no movement. He seemed to have paused. I was puzzled. This time I didn't cooperate with the follow-up of the prank, which must have made him lose face in front of Vivian and his buddies. Did he just let it go so easily? The mattress behind me sank, and a pair of strong arms encircled me. Ethan rested his head on my neck, like a weary bird returning to the forest, his warm breath filled with joy. "We have a baby, Little Moon." Little Moon was his nickname for me, saying I was like the moon in the sky, shining only for him, and it also resembled my name. But I knew that behind my back, he told Vivian and the others that I was pretentious, and Little Moon was just a made-up name to deceive me for fun, just to see me fall in love and turn from a goddess into a love-struck fool. I remained silent. He didn't know that I had already chosen not to keep this child. Ethan didn't notice anything unusual and took out my pregnancy test report, on which he had drawn 3 little hearts with a fountain pen. It was the Mont Blanc fountain pen I bought for him with my first month's salary after starting work, and he had carried it with him all these years. I didn't respond. Ethan held me tighter, whispering words of love incessantly, but my heart felt as if it were placed in the freezing winter, unable to thaw. "I'm sleepy, let's sleep early." He immediately obeyed and shut up, only saying, "Tomorrow we're going to Vivian's birthday party," and then quickly fell asleep. But I stayed awake all night. Ethan set up an amnesia scam, and I paid with 3 years of sincerity. So I would stage a fake death to make him regret for the rest of his life. At the birthday party, Ethan's buddies surrounded me in the private room and pushed the largest piece of cake in front of me. "Sister-in-law, Ethan says he loves watching you eat sweets the most." Ethan looked away, pretending not to notice. The moment the cake entered my mouth, my throat suddenly felt bitter, and I felt nauseous. But Vivian held me down and forced the unfinished cake into my mouth. "Irene, it's my birthday today, don't be disrespectful." "I thought you were disgusted by me." My lower abdomen immediately cramped up, the pain unbearable. Ethan's buddies jeered and laughed, treating me as a game to embarrass. After finishing the cake, I immediately rushed to the bathroom and vomited violently, while satisfied laughter came from the private room. The prank was successful. "Is your gastroenteritis still not better?" Ethan handed me warm water with mint leaves, a remedy he taught me to stop vomiting when we first met. I couldn't respond to his hypocrisy because the sharp abdominal pain was unbearable, like dense needle pricks. I looked down and saw blood flowing from my lower body down my legs, shocking to the eye. I grabbed Ethan's arm, "Take me to the hospital." But Vivian blocked the door, smiling and saying, "This is just menstrual disorder, very common for girls." "Ethan, don't make a fuss. Move." Ethan shouted angrily. This was the first time he opposed Vivian. When I woke up, I heard Vivian outside the clinic, coquettishly scolding Ethan's buddies. "Did you add too much hallucinogen? Wasn't it agreed to just make her embarrass herself in public?" But the buddies laughed. "Getting rid of a bastard burden is also a merit. Ethan can't thank me enough." "Yeah, it's been 3 years. If there's a child, it would be hard for Ethan to dump Irene." Ethan was silent for a long time before speaking. "Pranks are pranks, but don't harm her physically." Vivian was surprised for a moment, then angrily questioned, "Who was it that said to let this nerd taste the feeling of falling from the clouds to vent my anger? Making Irene embarrass herself in public as my birthday gift, wasn't that your idea? Have you fallen in love with her?" The next second, Ethan denied it as if avoiding a plague. "How could that be? I definitely love you." Immediately, cheerful laughter resumed outside the door, celebrating the end of the 98th prank and discussing how to carry out the 99th. I touched my flat abdomen, which ached faintly. My child and I were just a part of their prank game, merely a birthday gift for Vivian. I wiped away my tears and cancelled the abortion with trembling fingers. There was no need for me to make a decision. The child's father had already sentenced her to death. Just as I was about to contact my dad, Ethan came in. I closed my eyes tightly, pretending to sleep. I only heard his guilty, hoarse voice, "Irene, I'm sorry." The reason was self-evident. After I recovered and was discharged, Ethan said that his buddies and Vivian wanted to apologize to me and invited me to climb Chipon Mountain together. The temple at the top is said to be effective, where we could pray for our deceased child. I knew this might be another prank, but thinking of the child, my heart couldn't help but ache. After this, I would go to France, so I considered it as the last meeting with the child. Along the way, they all surrounded Vivian, laughing and flattering her, ignoring me. When passing by the blessing tree, Ethan bought a blessing plaque and wrote a blessing message for the child with me. Vivian smiled gently beside me. "Irene, you are such a good mother." I ignored her hypocrisy. There weren't many spots left on the blessing tree. When I was hanging it, I had to lean out over the fence. As I stretched half my body out, someone suddenly pushed me hard from behind. I fell forward unprepared, rolling down the steep slope. Intense pain instantly hit me, spreading to my internal organs. My leg was severely injured, almost immobile, and I immediately passed out. In a semi-conscious state, I felt Ethan picking me up, his eyes red. "Little Moon, don't be afraid, I'll take you to the hospital." "Why?" I asked weakly, tears blurring my vision. "Why do this to me?" The wound was external, but I felt my heart was also shattered. Ethan's eyes were full of guilt and fear, his voice trembling. "I didn't know they would do this, I really didn't know." Then my consciousness blurred, and everything went dark. When I woke up again, my right leg was already in a thick cast. The doctor said my leg might have permanent damage. I lay in bed, tears silently falling. Ethan sat by the bed, his face haggard, features contorted in pain, eyes full of guilt and heartache. He drew a small moon on the cast and said gently, "Little Moon, I will stay with you until you recover." I closed my eyes, and Ethan tucked me in, moving quietly to avoid disturbing me. He busied himself, preparing everything I needed for the hospital stay, making several trips and working for almost an hour before resting, looking like the most responsible boyfriend. Yet, ironically, he was the culprit who caused all this. I pretended to sleep, but my heart was pounding, expressing pain. Ethan didn't sleep all night, staying by my bed. He kept kissing the little moon on the cast, tears flowing continuously, holding my hand tightly as if I would disappear if he let go. "I'm sorry, little moon, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have listened to them, shouldn't have hurt you. Fortunately, I still have a chance." I will never hurt you again, you are my life, little moon. I almost lost you, I'm sorry. He whispered, his voice choked, and watched me all night like that. I knew he was in pain because of my injury. Last time, he said in front of Vivian and the others that it was just pranks and not to harm my body. I felt a bit soft-hearted but also found myself ridiculous. Ethan's principal was Vivian. This was the 99th prank, I was still a toy to please her, and Ethan acquiesced again. But who could say that for the 100th time, he wouldn't continue to be an accomplice in hurting me? The next day, while Ethan went to buy breakfast, I called my dad to send bodyguards to pick me up and prepare for the plane crash plan. While I was waiting, Vivian came, looking like a victor, smiling brightly and triumphantly. Irene, making you break your leg was part of my plan, this is the 99th prank. I held my breath, looking at her with hatred. Vivian looked me up and down, then straightened her luxury brand shawl. This is your 100th time competing in Chihuahua, and you'll be convicted of plagiarism. Ethan has sent me all the copies of your game, Shanhagen. He has already bribed the organizing committee, your submission time will always be 3 minutes later than mine. Just wait to be nailed to the pillar of shame. Chihuahua is the most authoritative game design competition in China. I have been preparing for it for 2 years, and the game copy of Shanhagen is on my computer. I was furious and slapped her, stealing my things and coveting my boyfriend. Vivian, you will always only deserve second-hand goods, don't you find it dirty? Vivian's eyebrows shot up, she grabbed my wrist and twisted it, about to slap me, now you are the one using second-hand goods. But the slap didn't land. Vivian, what are you doing? Ethan returned, followed by the bodyguards my dad had sent. Uncharacteristically, he lost his temper at Vivian. Vivian, understanding that he still had to perform the last love prank and had to maintain a relationship with me, and feeling guilty, left without saying anything. Without waiting for Ethan to explain, the bodyguards pushed a wheelchair to take me away. He sensed something was wrong, held the wheelchair, and asked anxiously, Little Moon, what are you doing? I lowered my head, I'm going to France for treatment, my dad is too worried about me. Ethan was unwilling, saying he couldn't rest assured. But he was the culprit for my leg injury. I insisted that my parents wanted to see me soon, so he had to agree. Then, as if impatient, he booked a ticket for tomorrow in front of me, saying he would come to find me, and asked for my flight number. I paused and told him it was MU 5882. He wanted to see me off, but his phone suddenly rang. It was his buddy Chen Ming. Ethan, come quickly. Sister-in-law fell down the stairs. Without even explaining a word about sister-in-law or saying goodbye, Ethan rushed out. I smiled bitterly and coldly, saying to the bodyguards, let's go. At the airport, Miss, the flight path has been arranged properly, Robert said he would create the most perfect crash scene. The boarding gate screen flashed CA 1621. I nodded and boarded the plane to France. 12:24, the day Ethan said we first met. True or false, I chose this moment for him to remember me forever, to remember that I died in his prank game, making him regret for life with only remorse left. 1 second before the plane crash, I sent Ethan a final message, Ethan, your 100th prank I play with my life. My phone was immediately flooded with countless calls and messages. The MU 5882 crash was completed. I took a last look at my phone and saw a special notification from Vivian's Facebook. Ethan said he would play a collection of pranks on a clown at our wedding. The look of someone crying with makeup ruined is perfect for the opening. The accompanying picture was of Ethan's safe in the Yunding apartment, neatly stacked with 99 voice recorders. Looking at the countless calls from Ethan, I smiled and pulled out the SIM card. He didn't know about the plane crash yet, he only knew that I had discovered his prank game. Doubt, anger, panic? Or unease and confusion? None of it mattered anymore. My dad said that making a private plane disappear from the radar was like wiping fingerprints off a wedding photo, telling me to rest assured. And I would completely disappear from Ethan's life. When Ethan heard about the plane crash, he rushed to the accident site recklessly. He barehandedly pried open the smoking metal debris, his custom suit torn by rebar. Firefighters tried to stop this madman but were frightened by his bloodshot eyes. My fiancée is inside. She was wearing the moon necklace I gave her today. At this moment, a tall stranger approached and, without letting him see clearly, punched him hard. Ethan was knocked to the ground but didn't fight back, only continued to search through the wreckage, longing to see a familiar face. Miss Irene's ashes are to be taken back to Paris to be buried with her mother. You have failed her, you can never wash away your sins. It was my dad's assistant. Ethan's legs went weak, and he knelt directly on the ground full of ruins. Then, he caught sight of a ring, picked it up with trembling hands. It was the style he and I had chosen together at the jewelry store. But inside was engraved, 100 pranks, betting you love me, which I had engraved later. Ethan was struck as if by lightning, trembling all over. Only then did he realize that I had known everything all along, and he not only hurt me repeatedly but also allowed Vivian and all his buddies to trample and insult me. In the prank love, Ethan developed feelings for me, but he deceived himself, thinking he still loved Vivian. He didn't want to lose face in front of Vivian and his buddies, didn't dare to admit it. Anyway, in his view, the 100th prank was coming soon, and I was completely unaware. He could completely ignore these and continue to hypocritically be my good boyfriend. After all, I was deeply in love and wouldn't leave him. But he didn't expect that I had discovered it and had been playing along with him. At this moment, Ethan finally empathized with my heart. In our 3 years of dating, he habitually stood on my left side, so close to my heart, so intimate, yet always separated by the Milky Way, neither cold nor hot. Now he finally felt the pain I had endured. Career ruined, studies postponed, leg injured, miscarriage, competition failed, lover's deception. But every time he had to choose, all these couldn't outweigh a single word from Vivian. Ethan knelt in the plane wreckage, devastated, crying almost to the point of collapse, and was later found by kind staff and sent to the hospital. Seeing Ethan like a walking corpse, Vivian was somewhat dissatisfied. Exactly 100 pranks, let's make it official, Ethan. Ethan didn't react. Using a dead person's design to compete, she shook the USB drive, smiling proudly. Brother Ethan, do you want to be the award presenter? Ethan's expression froze, cold as ice. He suddenly rushed over, slapped her hard, and grabbed her neck, slamming her against the floor-to-ceiling window. I won't be with you. If you dare touch her things, I'll make sure you spend your 25th birthday in prison. Vivian, it's a fight to the death between us. Vivian covered her face, angrily saying, Are you crazy? She's dead, why are you so agitated for her? Don't forget, you pranked her to vent my anger. Ethan's buddies echoed, Yeah, she's finally dead, Ethan is completely free now. It's just a pity we missed the last chance to see her make a fool of herself, ha ha ha. I was even planning to have someone throw manure at her during the design competition. Ethan shouted loudly, Shut up. If it weren't for you guys and these prank games, how could Irene have died? The buddies looked at each other and then burst into laughter. It was you who wanted to prank her, it was you who killed her, you are the murderer. Why pretend to be affectionate? Wasn't it you who put laxatives in her brown sugar water? Who made her miss the defense? Before the words finished, he was knocked to the ground by Ethan, and several people fought together. In the end, Ethan was exhausted and sent to the emergency room with injuries all over his body. The last news about Ethan that my dad's assistant brought me was, he turned against everyone, often self-harmed, mumbling apologies to his fiancée, and frequently visited the psychiatric department. He also erected a tombstone for me in the Beijing cemetery, often staying there for a long time, with the game logo we designed together engraved on his chest. Everyone in the Beijing circle knew that Ethan had an unforgettable white moonlight who died in a plane crash. I scoffed and continued to receive the most advanced leg injury treatment in France. 2 years later, I established a game studio in France and produced the previously independently designed Chinese-style fantasy game Mountain and Sea Ashes. I submitted it to the International Game Design Competition under the name Alma. Due to the design features of Chinese mythology and fantasy upgrade flow, the main storyline suited the European and American player market, and with solid strength, it won the Gold Award, causing a huge sensation in China. This was the first time a Chinese game designer won the gold award in this game competition. The auction price of the game quickly rose to the top, continuously increasing to the tens of millions level, and the studio was flooded with countless partners every day. The auction was to be held in 3 days. My dad asked me, "Aren't you afraid that Ethan will find you if you make such a big fuss?" It was said that in the Beijing circle, he was already known as the widower madman, and no one dared to mention the name Irene in front of him. I didn't care and smiled. 2 years have passed, the one trapped in the shadows is him, not me. Now, I'm not afraid of anyone. My dad looked at my legs, which could now walk, and nodded. "Scum like Ethan, if he dares to come and harm you, I'll kill him." Mountain and sea ashes was the draft I drew stroke by stroke in front of him. He knew almost all the designs. Now that it won the gold award in the international competition, he couldn't have not heard the news or become suspicious. But he never thought that the plane crash was a fake death. With clues, it would be easy for him to investigate. The day after the international game competition announced the gold award, Ethan appeared at the door of my studio. He was shockingly thin, his suit hanging loosely on his shoulders, the phoenix tattoo on his collarbone peeking out from the collar, and around his neck was the ring with 100 pranks that I had left in the crashed plane. His brows and eyes were extremely dark due to long-term depression, exuding a gloomy and inorganic coldness. The moment he saw me, Ethan's gaze instantly became gentle and focused. "Little Moon," he said softly, his voice a bit hoarse, "congratulations on winning the gold award in the international competition." Hearing the former nickname, I only felt disgusted. Ethan then held up the dark green notebook like presenting a treasure, giving a stiff smile, and said, "Congratulations, your dream has come true." He wanted to use this notebook full of past memories to retain me, but I had long discovered that it contained Vivian's prank instructions and couldn't deceive myself that it was a love record exclusively for me. My face was as calm as water, and I said lightly, "Ethan came personally to present the trophy?" Unfortunately, someone who has died once on the award stage cannot accept the blessings of the living. But Ethan ignored the thorns in my words, as if confirming that I was still alive. His emotions uncontrollably collapsed, tears fell instantly, and his voice trembled. "You're still alive, that's great. I thought I had lost you forever." He then took out the Hetian jade necklace my mother left me, which he had once discarded as part of a prank and given to Vivian. "Little Moon, I'm returning it to you. I was wrong. These 2 years, every day I've lived in pain and self-blame. I hate myself for doing so many things that hurt you. Can you?" The clothes at his wrist slid down, revealing numerous shocking scars, all knife wounds. My heart ached for a moment, but I was too lazy to pay attention to his fake affection and wanted to take back my mother's relic. "No." I coldly interrupted him. "The Irene who loved you is already dead, died in the plane accident 2 years ago. 100 pranks, miscarriage, leg injury. Do you know how many surgeries I had to undergo to stand up again? Ethan, why don't you go die?" 123. I lifted my skirt, revealing the cold metal joints of the assistive prosthetic. The scars from the surgery wrapped around the muscles, atrophied and ugly. "All of this is thanks to you." Ethan froze, shocked, his eyes red, heartache flowing into his eyes without concealment. Once, I desperately wished that in the prank game, he could be a bit more steadfast towards me, love me a little more. But there was none. Ethan gripped my hand tightly and, upon hearing this, knelt directly in front of me, begging like a pitiful abandoned dog. "I know I deserve to die, but since heaven has let us meet again, it means our fate isn't over. I beg you, give me another chance, Irene, Little Moon." As he spoke, he tried to hug my legs tightly. I shuddered all over, feeling nauseous. "Let go of me. Ethan, you lunatic. Who are you? Get lost." A tall man rushed over and kicked Ethan. Due to his long-term mental instability, he almost instantly lost strength and fell to the ground. I took the opportunity to retrieve the necklace. Eris stood in front of me, concernedly asking if I was injured. I shook my head. He was a game designer in the studio, from Germany, whom I had hired at a high salary. Ethan, with a bitter face, like being abandoned and given up, struggled to crawl towards me. "Who is he? Have you fallen in love with him? Irene, you can't do this to me, I really can't live without you. What do I have to do for you to forgive me?" Eris kicked him hard again. "You have threatened our boss's personal safety, I'm going to call the police." Ethan couldn't move, coughing painfully, his face covered in dust and tear stains, looking utterly disheveled. I said coldly, "Whoever it is has nothing to do with you. Forgive? Unless you die." With Eris's help, I walked back to the studio, glimpsing in my peripheral vision Ethan's eyes full of the mist of being ignored and uncared for, painful just like me 2 years ago. The next day, while preparing for the Mountain and Sea Ashes game auction, I suddenly received a call from the Paris hospital. Ethan had cut his own calf. When the ambulance arrived, he was lying in a pool of blood, smiling happily, murmuring, "This way, Irene will forgive me." The hospital staff said that Ethan only requested to contact me. If I didn't go to the scene, he wouldn't accept treatment, and his wound was still bleeding profusely. 134, but I couldn't forgive easily. That would be a betrayal to myself who was deceived and pranked 100 times 2 years ago. I politely declined the staff. "I have no acquaintance with this Mr. Ethan. If he really doesn't want treatment, you can contact the funeral home for him." Immediately, Ethan's trembling shout came from the other end of the phone, "Little Moon, my leg hurts so much, I feel like I'm dying. I beg you, please come see me, just one look, you used to care so much about me." My stomach churned with nausea, and I hung up the phone directly. The former Irene, upon hearing any news about Ethan, would drop everything and rush over. But every time I arrived at the scene, it was either empty or filled with Vivian and the others' mockery. "Irene, why are you like Ethan's dog? He beckons, and you come running? Irene, you're so cheap, dating to your extent is really shameful, clinging to him. I really look down on you." I gathered my emotions, stepped out of the past darkness, and continued to prepare for the next day's Mountain and Sea Ashes game auction. This time I was determined to succeed. At midnight before the game auction, Vivian released a pile of manuscript materials and programming designs on her Facebook, including the initial operation framework of the game, and the computer showed the time was 2 years ago. She used this as evidence to accuse me of plagiarizing her original game. Vivian, who had instigated 99 prank games back then, was eventually dumped by Ethan. For 2 years, her family business had been targeted by Ethan, and she had a hard time. Now that I, the culprit, had come back to life, she was naturally furious. I immediately recognized it as the game copy design Ethan had stolen from my computer and given to Vivian. On the day I faked my death, Vivian had proudly boasted to me that it would win the Chiruwe Games gold medal. And she would win thanks to Ethan's protection, while I would be the plagiarist who submitted it 3 minutes later. Later, because I was recovering from injuries, I didn't participate in the Chiruwe game, and Vivian, due to Ethan's threats, didn't dare to participate either. But unexpectedly, after 2 years, she seemed to be going all out, venting all the pain and suffering she had endured on me. The Facebook post was immediately pushed to the top of the trending searches, and the internet was in an uproar. I, the gold award winner of the international competition, became a villain who plagiarized an unknown designer. This bucket of dirty water splashed, and the internet was full of curses against me. What was thought to be glory was all theft. The auction was to be held the next day, and carrying this scandal would inevitably affect the game's price and reputation. At this moment, the official website showed that our game's auction price had dropped to half of its original value. More netizens complained to the competition officials, saying that a plagiarist like me didn't deserve the gold award and demanded its withdrawal. The assistant anxiously held the tablet. "It's still not too late to cancel the auction now." I touched my right leg, which still ached faintly after rehabilitation, and looked at the dawn in Paris outside the window, retrieved the source files from the cloud backup 2 years ago. Proving my innocence wasn't difficult, but finding them among the vast sea of manuscripts and source files, and then compiling an explanation, I didn't know how much time and loss it would cause. Perhaps even staying up all night wouldn't be enough, and my Mountain and Sea Ashes would have to be disqualified from the auction. Just as I was enduring a headache and preparing to handle it, the conference room door was suddenly pushed open. Alma. Quick, watch the live stream. It's Ethan. I opened the computer. He was lying on a hospital bed, wearing a hospital gown, emaciated and pale. There was an 4-needle in the back of his hand, ECG monitoring electrodes on his chest, and the hospital gown collar vaguely revealed unhealed knife wounds. Those were from his recent self-harm. These are Alma's design manuscripts from 2019 to 2021. He held up a thick stack of yellowed manuscript papers. At 2 a.m. on November 3, 2019, Alma messaged me from the library saying, "The Phoenix's eyes must have the tearful light of nirvana." Ethan pressed play on a voice recorder. My voice, mixed with the hum of a coffee machine, flowed out. "Ethan, the prototype of the maze in the 3rd chapter references the mausoleum of the first Qin emperor." Alma, and Facebook. I opened Facebook upon hearing this and found that Ethan had posted several videos showing a large number of manuscripts, design documents, and programming records, as well as the Git version records of all my design drawings, with timestamps accurate to the millisecond. All the content pointed to one fact, that Mountain and Sea Ashes was my original work, not Vivian's. I was involved in part of the process of this game. I can prove that every creative idea came from Alma. Regarding Vivian's behavior, I will seriously consider taking her to court to protect Alma's legitimate rights. The public opinion reversed, hitting rock bottom and bouncing back. Vivian originally thought she could bring me down this time, but she didn't expect Ethan to stand up and testify for me, so she had to delete her post and apologize. Her family business was also impacted by this turmoil, with partnerships being terminated one after another. The internet was full of verbal attacks and malicious accusations against her. At the end of the live stream, Ethan's face, as cold as ice, forced a smile. "I hope everyone pays more attention to Miss Alma's Mountain and Sea Ashes game auction tomorrow. Alma, I hope I can make up for it a little." I listened to the words coming through the current, silent for a moment, with complex thoughts. The game's auction price on the official website quickly rebounded, even surpassing the previous level. At the auction, Ethan was in a wheelchair, pushed out, just like when I first arrived in France. A colleague joked, "Is Ethan also going to bid for Alma's Mountain and Sea Ashes?" There were many bidders, and the price soared, but many stopped bidding because they couldn't afford higher prices. In the end, only Ethan and a Russian client were left competing. 10.1 million, 11 million. Eris rubbed his face, exclaiming, "We're not even a buyout game, there's still endless revenue from subsequent operations. My dream is really coming true." "But your ex-fiancé is really persistent. Is he trying to win you back?" I turned a deaf ear, just watching the show. In the end, Mountain and Sea Ashes was bought by Ethan for $12 million, with the auction price almost reaching the sum of the top 10 games. After the transaction was confirmed, Ethan walked towards me. After the leg injury, he had been working non-stop for several days, looking pale, his features still gloomy. "I bought this game as a gift for you. I've always recognized your talent, and you will surely shine in the future. I can shift my work focus to France, would you be willing?" Ethan pursed his lips, seeming a bit nervous. I smiled politely and said, "Thank you for your appreciation, Ethan. Besides work, I'm not willing to do anything else. I'll just consider it a big profit. Goodbye." Ethan's eyelashes trembled rapidly, his bloodless lips let out a cough, shattering his original hopes, and I turned away without hesitation. At the press conference, I was interviewed by reporters, and someone asked curiously, "Miss Alma, Mr. Ethan from your country, China, spent $12 million to buy Mountain and Sea Ashes. When you were embroiled in the plagiarism scandal, he also presented your design manuscripts as evidence. May I ask if there is any special relationship between you two? Are you friends or lovers?" I hesitated for a few seconds and finally explained generously, "When I was in China, we could be considered friends. We discussed the production of the Mountain and Sea Ashes game." But that was the end of it. After the press conference, Ethan, leaning on a cane, was supported by his assistant as he approached me. I was discussing the next game design with colleagues and had no intention of paying attention to him, but suddenly, there was a roar of an engine from behind. The moment I turned around, an unlicensed van was speeding towards us, and sitting in the driver's seat was Vivian, with disheveled hair and haggard features, her face expressionless, eyes full of hatred. "Irene, be careful." Ethan shook off his assistant and pushed me away with all his strength, while he himself, due to his weak legs, collapsed to the ground and was hit by the oncoming van. Bang! I quickly rushed over, but Ethan was already covered in blood, his condition critical. "Ethan, how are you?" Ethan struggled to force a smile, holding my hand for the first time since our reunion. He coughed up blood and said slowly, "Little Moon, I love you. In the next life, I will love you sincerely and purely." After saying that, his hand went limp. Vivian was sentenced to life imprisonment for intentional homicide, and Ethan's family took him back to China for burial. At the time of the 100th prank game and the plane crash, the Irene who was involved with Ethan had already disappeared, and the one who survived in her place was Alma. Alma, who lived only for herself, her family, and her ideals. I chose to stay in France and continue to complete the next game design. In another international game design competition, I submitted my new work and became the first game designer to win the Gold Award consecutively. And the spring breeze after Rebirth had just begun.